وسهلا بكل الذين ينضموا للاستماع إلى راديو بلدي أول راديو عربي أمريكي ويعنى بقضايا العرب في المهجر. برامجنا في راديو بلدي كل يوم جمعة من 8 وحتى 9 صباحا في بث حي ومباشر عبر WNZK راديو 690 AM. صباح الخير بلدي، صباح الخير لكل مستمعينا.
Welcome to Radio Baladi, the first Arab, Middle Eastern, and American simulcast radio show. Radio Baladi is broadcast every Friday morning on WNZK 690 AM from 8 until 9 Eastern Time on Good Morning, Michigan. Our call-in number 248-557-3300. And now, stay tuned for the best radio talk show on Arab and American issues.
I am Atif Abdalmajid. Join me the first Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. I will be discussing some of the most important issues and events in the Middle East live on America's Voice of the Arabs. WNZK 690 AM and WDMV 700 AM.
Good day, everybody. As the year 2024 draws to a close, the Middle East and the world continue to grapple with profound changes and challenges. From Gaza to Lebanon to Ukraine and now to Aleppo and Hama in Syria. So we're going to split the next hour into two parts. Part one will deal with a summary of key events in the year 2024. And in part two, we'll discuss Syria. Political landscape and also the future of the Assad regime, Bashar al-Assad. To help us do that, we have three distinguished guests and experts. We have Dr. Abdalmajid Katranji, an expert on the Middle East and a member of the Syrian American Council. We have Professor Brad Roth of Wayne State University, and we have Mr. Saeed Arakat, who's a distinguished Washington-based Palestinian journalist. So my next question, or my first question, will go to all three guests, and we start with, let's see, we'll start with Dr. Katranji, then followed by Dr. Professor Roth, then followed by Mr. Arakat. But before I give you the question, just a small program note, and that is we are coming to you not just on radio, but also by video. If you go to the Facebook page of US Arab Radio on Facebook, you can see us you can see us on Zoom, the application Zoom. Now the question is for each of my distinguished guests and experts, what are the three key events that have shaped 2024 so far? I know 2024 isn't finished yet. So, Dr. Katranji.
The three key events, thank you very much for having me. I think the three key events that we have to look at, first and foremost, you're looking at the Israeli activities and actions, the wars that it has initiated and the atrocities that have been committed in Gaza and even in Lebanon. As you look at the expansion of Israeli military force well beyond its borders, and the unclear political determination that it has in all these engagements that it's involving itself in, because the consequence of its particular actions as it relates to Gaza and then into Lebanon, also extending to Iran, to Yemen, into Syria, and obviously on the global global stage, has had far-reaching implications not just into the regional conflict that it says that it is addressing, but in terms of shifting in global politics and global dynamics. I think the second very important event that has occurred in 2024 is actually the United States election. With the election of Donald Trump, you have a very different approach, a very different thinking with regards to foreign politics, foreign policy, global engagement, and U.S. military involvement, as well as the methodology by which the United States would interact. And the significance of this is it's not something we don't know about. We've actually seen that same behavior between 2016 to 2020. And now we have a comparison with the Democratic administration of President Joseph Biden from 2021 to, from 2021 to 2025 or 2024. And then now we're going to see a reenactment of the first presidency. So now we're going to say, well, what has anything changed? Do we know? Do we see Trump's behavior is going to be the same thing that we saw in the first term? Or now are we going to see something radically different? And if you're looking at the profile of the people he's choosing, it is a very, very different type of administration we're going to see this time around than the first time around. The third major event, as it pertains to the Middle East specifically, but also has significant implications globally, is what we've now suddenly seen going on in Syria. And obviously, there's the long-standing conflict between the Syrian rebels as well as the Assad regime and the various dynamics that are at play on the ground there. But it also has far-reaching implications because it's announcing that there is a shift in the traditional supporters of Bashar al-Assad, in which you've now had his critical ally and support on the ground, Hezbollah, being essentially decimated. Then you have Russia and its role and its involvement in Syria, vis-a-vis that. How committed is it to Syria? Because it's mired in a war in the Ukraine, where there's gains one day and losses the next day, and even Russia is now reaching out to countries like North Korea for aid and assistance. And then lastly, Iran. What is now Iran's movement and its position as a global and regional power, and what we see in Syria seems to imply significant changes globally on that stage. So I believe, at least for right now, and obviously with the Middle East, you could always bring in the Houthis and what's going on in Houthis. You can also discuss Sudan. You could actually discuss the Gulf and its policies and the economic enlightenment process that Saudi Arabia is trying to engage in, but then its economic and then political implications globally. Obviously, Turkey is always an issue. So I know that others might say, oh, no, there's all these other things, and we're fully cognizant of those other things. But I think in terms of the three things that play today, those are the three things that have the greatest impact on the Middle East directly and then globally.
Thank you. Professor Roth.
Well, I would have, of course, identified the same three things as Dr. Katranji in terms of the most significant, but let me see what else I can say about these. With respect to Donald Trump, it's very difficult to know what the new direction will be in U.S. foreign policy anywhere. The first Trump administration was marked by Trump being hemmed in many ways by what he would call the deep state, but by various kind of old-time Republican regulars on the one hand and members of the military establishment who played an extraordinary role in his administration on the other. And so Trump, who didn't particularly expect to be elected president, I think, in 2016, didn't really have a plan going forward. And therefore, it wasn't quite clear what the balance of forces within his administration would ever be on any particular issue. And there was a fair amount of incoherence. We also don't know what's going to happen in the coming Trump administration, but the one thing that we know is that the old guardrails are gone. And so what we have here is an extremely transactional president, and someone who is transactional, not necessarily in the national interest, but in the interests of his own person. And therefore, what he finds to be advantageous and what the costs and benefits are of a deal for him in any given instance is going to be very difficult to predict and very unstable. And we see by the sort of range of choices that he's made in terms of whom to populate the administration with. On the one hand, you've got Marco Rubio becoming Secretary of State, someone who is very much identified with the neocon camp, much more closely tied to old Republican policies. And yet you've got Tulsi Gabbard being put forward for Director of National Intelligence, which would seem to represent an entirely different direction. It's also the case that although the Israelis are no doubt celebrating Donald Trump's election, and Netanyahu and Trump have been very much identified with each other on the Israeli political scene, it's hardly clear what that relationship amounts to. Apparently, behind the scenes, Trump has said some very negative things about Netanyahu. If Netanyahu gets in the way of a deal that Trump wants to make, he could be thrown over the side just as anyone else in Trump's way. And so we don't know what's going to happen, but we do know that certainly standards of decency or adherence to international norms are not going to be in play. With respect to Israel's conduct, being an international lawyer, my focus is on the legal aspects. And so we've had, of course, in the course of this year, a continuing lawsuit brought by South Africa before the International Court of Justice under the Genocide Convention that has given rise to 3 rounds of provisional measures. And those provisional measures have been ignored, basically, by the Israelis. It appeared after the 3rd round that perhaps there would be some restraint on the Israelis' part. That lasted for a few months and then seemed to completely dissipate. And so we're seeing now more repercussions of this. Just in the last few days, the issuance of a couple of important reports, first by Amnesty International, which has come down on the side of characterizing Israeli actions in the Gaza Strip as genocide. And then more obscurely from an American perspective, but still I think very important, a report by a senior lecturer at Hebrew University in Jerusalem named Lee Mordechai, who has compiled a range of materials in a much less rhetorical, much less conclusory fashion, simply to document, particularly for an Israeli audience that's largely been sheltered from all of this, the extent of the horrors being committed on behalf of the Israeli state here. And so as these developments continue, as these reports issue, it becomes harder and harder to do what the Israelis have tried to do in the face of the lawsuit, which is to say that it's merely an act of anti-Semitism that this suit would even be brought, that this is meritless, frivolous. What are we even doing here? I attended the 3rd round of provisional measures arguments. It was remarkable how the Israeli counsel were playing to the gallery rather than to the court on that subject. I don't think that's going to work anymore as more and more reports become published that can't be claimed to be tainted by partisanship that demonstrate the extent of this. The other thing, of course, you have are the arrest warrants. And the arrest warrants against both Netanyahu and Gallant are being treated as obligatory on the part of states parties to the International Criminal Court statute. The United States, of course, is not and will defy this, and indeed may retaliate against the International Criminal Court in various ways as a result of this. But Netanyahu, I think, is now going to be quite constrained in his travel plans, in spite of the fact that there is actually a complicated argument about his immunity that would have to be worked out in the courts of any state that would deal with him. Still in all, this is a pretty significant development, as that arrest warrant has now been confirmed by the pretrial chamber of the ICC. So I think that these are important developments on the legal front, obviously not doing anything on the ground to protect Palestinians at the moment, and it's hard to forecast anything positive going on. I'll leave Syria over to Saeed.
Okay, Mr. Arakat.
Yes, thank you for having me, and greetings to all. Well, I'm just going to repeat what you guys said. So, because these are the most significant events, I think that to me, the most significant event is the way this genocide in Gaza continued to go on, in plain sight, and nothing has been done about it. And of course, it brought in all these other elements that you've talked about, especially the ICC. I think that's probably one of the most significant events that happened. I don't think things will ever be the same for Israel. I mean, it seems, on a trajectory of achieving a great deal of goals and so on. But in fact, things have changed. Things have changed. I think that Israel has been, in many ways, called the criminal entity that it is, and it's not going to redeem itself. It has been founded on criminality. It will continue to be criminal. It's aided by a colonial West in the most vulgar of ways, as we have seen go on and goes on. So, the ICC ruling is historic in many ways, and there's no backing down. I think it's going to probably include or incriminate a lot of people, a lot of Israeli soldiers and officers and so on, who have basically incriminated themselves. I mean, they have the evidence is huge and monumental. My back and forth yesterday in the State Department on this issue is, intent. Genocide is determined by intent. I think the intent was always there. It was clearly stated by Israeli officials, from Herzog, the president of Israel, to commanders, to Halevi, to Gallant, to Netanyahu. I mean, since day one, since the ground war began on the 27th of October 2023, we basically have, even since October 7th, we have statements that clearly state that these guys have an intent to commit genocide against the Palestinians, and they have done everything possible that basically, paints a picture of genocide. So that is very significant. It's gonna go on. The second event really is, the collapse of the Biden presidency. I mean, we've seen this since the beginning of the year, or even since last year, and so on, and his stubborn adherence to remaining in the running and so on, although the writing was on the wall all throughout, and it was just a presidency that was just going downhill, and nobody would recognize it. I think the Democrats, if anything, in this in 2024 showed that the party is incoherent. I think somebody used that term, incoherent, and the party has no real program and no real pathway to win. There's a huge disconnect between the base of the party, the progressive wing of the party, the minority of the party, and so on, and the establishment of the party. So not only on foreign policy issues, which we are discussing here, but also almost on every other issue, they were unable. I mean, they did some good things, the administration, whether it's in terms of economy, in terms of rulings and so on, but they could not in any way articulate this and sell it to the public. And so you have the collapse of the Biden campaign, or the Biden presidency in many ways, and then the ascendancy, of course, of Trump, who should not be there. I mean, it's amazing that Trump was able to basically make the most amazing comeback in recent American history. I mean, we all, just to repeat ourselves, we all know that this only happened once in American history with Grover Cleveland twice, and now we see it with Trump. And Trump, one, who's a shyster. I mean, he's Nassab, as we call him Bil-Arabi. I mean, he's nothing more than Nassab. Now, I don't think crook. Nassab means a crook, Brad. So in every sense of the word. So in terms of how his presidency will go forward, I don't think it's going to be any different than the former one. I mean, he talks about deal. But in fact, he's not going to do any deal. I mean, look at what he did back, between 2017, and I understand what you explained, Brad, about how the presidency was the sort of plan as you go along kind of a thing, and he did not have a plan and all that stuff. But in fact, it remained the same. We saw him talk about deals with North Africa. It did not happen. We saw him talk about deals everywhere else. It did not happen. He came up with something called the deal of the century, and for the Palestinians, it did not happen. I mean, he's definitely went along and sort of, nailing down a very Zionist agenda, going along with what Netanyahu wanted, and that's what they did, and that's what they will continue to do. So whether he's going to be, I probably think that, we will probably see something with Ukraine. I think he probably because anyway, the Ukraine thing is reaching its expiration date. I mean, it's reaching its the end of its shelf life, so to speak. So we will see this. Sure, Biden stubbornly continued to aid Ukraine, but to no end. Now, the third event is, of course, I agree, is Syria. Syria was a shocker, for many people. The fact that the Syrian army, basically, at least for now, has retreated so quickly and so on, and abandoned its positions and all that is shocking in many ways. I think we're going to see a counteroffensive. I don't see that Damascus is going to fall to the rebels. I mean, these guys work for. Yeah. Basically, I mean, they run the Turkish agenda and so on, and they will continue to do that. They're aided by the United States of America. Nothing happens without it. Of course, there are all the elements that so many details and so on Hezbollah and the fight in Lebanon and all these things, and basically the diminishing power of Hezbollah and its ability to fight. So all this basically, works together in terms of what we have in the current Syrian scene.
We will continue the discussion, but we are going to take a short break, after which I'm going to ask Dr. Katranji a simple question. Now, in light of what Mr. Arakat described Trump as a crook, Nassab, the question will be, even with that description, do you see any hope that Mr. Trump will do something to resolve the current conflicts after the break?
As the weather gets colder, it's a good idea to layer up with scarves, hats, and mittens. Another layer of protection this season is to get your flu and COVID-19 vaccines. You can get both vaccines at the same time. Talk to your healthcare provider or learn more at michigan.gov/COVID-flu-RSV and layer up for some added peace of mind. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Michigan's winter forecast is snow, snow, and more snow. And for a little variety, ice. Since that means slippery roads, stay safe by following these driving tips. Don't use cruise control on ice and snow. Use turn signals sooner to give others more time to react. Keep your car's fluids, tires, and wipers well maintained. And most important of all, drive slow on ice and snow. A message from the Michigan Office of Highway Safety Planning.
Life for Relief and Development has now been rated as one of the best charities for humanitarian aid. Life's humanitarian projects span the globe, and Life is celebrating its 30th anniversary of providing essential life-saving aid to people and communities in 36 countries, regardless of race, color, religion, or cultural background. Where there is life, there is hope. And when disaster occurs here or around the world, including being one of the first responders to the Turkey-Syria earthquake crisis, Life for Relief and Development rushes in to provide food, medical aid, and shelter to those in need. We are looking to help the earthquake victims, and we take 0% overhead on emergency donations. So please help improve these efforts. Learn more about our involvement to help the helpless and bring hope where it's needed most. And make your tax-deductible donation to Life for Relief and Development now at lifeusa.org or call 248-424-7493. That's 248-424-7493.
I am Atif Abdaljawad. Join me the first Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. I will be discussing some of the most important issues and events in the Middle East live on America's Voice of the Arabs. WNZK 690 AM and WDMV 700 AM.
Welcome back to our discussion on Radio Baladi. We are discussing the events of 2024, key events, and whether we can see more conflicts in the new year or more solutions. So my question now for Dr. Katranji is, with Trump back to the White House, Mr. Trump, who Mr. Arakat just described as Nassab in Arabic, do you see any hope for resolving any or all of the current conflicts in Gaza, Ukraine, Syria, even Sudan? Do you see any hope?
You know, I echo the intrigue. You know, it's all about what's your definition of crook, right? Is it Trump's behavior, or is it Biden's absolute ignoring the genocide and continuing providing arms that actually are critical in mass destruction to the Palestinians? Like who in history is going to be looked at for criminality or being a crook? And obviously that definition can continue to expand, as we always discuss. You know, politics is a very dirty business, right? There's always an element of crooks there, or shysterism, or however we want to. But you know, in large part, the critical thing here is Trump, as Professor Roth outlined, is transactional. His behavior is going to be, if I do this, what am I going to get in return? And it's going to start with, and this is really important for people that are trying to engage the White House moving forward for the next 4 years, especially with the category of individuals that he has put himself around with, because it is very clear this is about loyalty, right? It is almost like a Middle East dictatorship in terms of it's about, loyalty, and then it's about what you can provide for me so that I can then give you or gift you something in return. And in a way that makes life a little bit easier, right? Let's face it, people voted for that type of presidency. They know what they were getting. They know what they were expecting. And Trump isn't shy about his position. Trump was elected for two specific purposes. Purpose number one, first and foremost, it's always the purpose by which people elect presidents in the United States. It's the economy. It's always the economy. It's always the pocketbook. When they're sitting there, and I know that we feel passionate, we have this perspective and we look at it, but for the American, whether they're Arab, Muslim, Jew, Christian, otherwise, when it's an American sitting in that poll booth, looking at Biden versus Trump, looking, part one, part two, Trump versus Clinton, and beyond, that we can go to history, they're first going to say is, what is the situation in my bank account today, and how am I handling bills? And it's very clear, inflationary pressures have been overwhelming to individuals, right? So his policies were about economics, and very specifically about prices and market prices, and then therefore jobs, employment, increasing individual wealth, but at the same time, improving the purchase and the strength of the dollar. That transaction is always going to come at play. Is there going to be a financial gain or loss with this behavior when it comes to Israel and its genocide in Gaza, or Israel and its attacks on Beirut and Lebanon, between Russia and Ukraine? That group is going to be like, look, Ukraine owns all the grain in the world, all our cereals, all our breakfast cereals, our breads and things like that. Ukraine is the breadbasket to the world. That's a transaction. Prices are up. And one great way to lower the price at the grocery store is you got to look at a way to resolve that conflict. Now, when you're looking at that conflict in Russia and Ukraine, now you have the transactional. There's that domino effect that they're going to say, okay, well, is it worth it then for America to try to take over the Ukraine in its entirety? No, I'm sorry, and I don't mean take over, but resolve and maintain Ukraine's integrity in its entirety? Or is it worth it to let Russia keep that about 20% of the territory that is taken over, and then transaction, give and take, give and take? You know, you got to give up Syria, you got to give up this, you got to give us this, you got to let Ukraine be under NATO, we're going to let you keep parts of Georgia or Moldova. There's going to be that transactional thing. That's where I think the policy is going to initiate when you're looking at. Number two, it's going to be about border security, right? That was his big thing. That's always been Trump's thing. And everything is also then going to be on the implication is what is going to be the biggest threat to his perceived concept of border security and territorial integrity. And so I think that behavior is also those transactions as he interacts with Saudi Arabia, as he interacts with looking at countries like Sudan, Somalia, or Yemen, and you know, is any of these behaviors and wars, conflicts there, do they have any implications dealing with Iran on border security specifically? And obviously, we're because of this is U.S. Arab and radio and television. We're discussing these, but clearly you've got the issues of economic policy and border policy when it comes to China behavior and India and et cetera. But just to keep it focused, these are the areas that we're looking at. So the transactional nature of President Trump gives you an idea on if you're going to engage, if you're going to try to negotiate, if you're looking for a position to improve your status globally, whether it's resolving these conflicts or tragically, whether not resolving the conflicts, it's going to be about that plus and minus gain based on these two issues that Trump advertises, works, and maintains that these are the two most important issues for him. And he's developing an administration that focuses on that.
Professor Roth, you talked about lack of foreign policy direction for Mr. Trump. What else is missing in the attempt so far to resolve the current conflicts?
Well, you know, I wish that I could share the optimism that Dr. Katranji has expressed about Trump as a kind of rational actor who is engaged in deal making, you know, playing four-dimensional chess or something here. And not to say that Dr. Katranji has really imputed that, but the issue is, you know, what just because he's a deal maker, does that mean that he's actually an effective deal maker? Does it mean that he's someone who is really looking to maximize the you know particular you know set of policy goals in a serious way? I think historically what we've seen is he's made a bunch of bungled moves in many different parts of the world. You know, remember his love letters with Kim Jong-un. This is someone who's easily flattered, someone who is easily bought off in very petty ways. And so, you know, what I would say about the Biden administration is to invoke the French nobleman La Rochefoucauld that hypocrisy is the tribute that vice pays to virtue. The hypocrisy is a bad enough thing, but the absence of a felt need to be hypocritical really unshackles people in a serious way. And the problem is that there's really no one to hold Trump's feet to the fire because none of the elites around Trump care about the kinds of things that most of us care about. And the constituencies that supported him electorally were clearly not invested in the kinds of normative considerations that we would put in the forefront. I think that the big losers in this are going to be the Palestinians because there's not even the most minimal concern for the kinds of sort of basic humanitarian goals that at least the Biden administration had to pay lip service to. With respect to some other parts of the world, Personal relationships matter. It's possible, for example, that Syria could be dealt with through Trump's interactions with Putin and Erdogan.
Yes.
And Erdogan is a crucial player in all of that. And there may be reasons why Trump would be eager enough to participate in a deal that would settle down the situation in Syria. Of course, Syria's main significance for Western powers is the refugees that it produces, and that had a tremendous destabilizing effect on Europe. But ironically, one might, from a very crass Trumpian perspective, see that what's bad for Europe is good for the United States in this respect. And these destabilizing efforts, the effects have had the further effect of strengthening right-wing populist movements throughout Europe, and therefore undermining challenges to Trump's efforts at global leadership. So, it's hard to know, again, what his motivations are in respect of any given crisis. And I think these things are not only unknowable, they're also unstable. They could shift from moment to moment based upon what the personnel might be around him and what kinds of side deals there might be, public or private, with various actors. So all I can say is fasten your seatbelt.
Yes, great.
Mr. Arakat, you talked about the collapse of Mr. Biden's presidency, but Mr. Biden at the same time tried to pursue a two-state solution. It didn't work. But would the two-state solution be adopted by Mr. Trump? That's A. And B, would the two-state solution lead to a more peaceful, stable Middle East?
Well, the two-state solution will never happen. I mean, we have seen the end of that slogan, if you will. I mean, we came close, or at least on its appearance, the closest we have ever gotten is basically back in 1993 and 1994 during the Oslo Accord, and it was obvious that the Israelis did not want a two-state solution, so it collapsed. They continued on with settlement. They continued on with attacking, even the CQS, whatever, Palestinian Authority all throughout the 90s and so on. We saw that the land designated for the two-state solution was diminishing all the time, was shrinking all the time, and so on. So when you say Trump, wanted a two-state solution, I think he talked about it. He paid lip service to it, but basically Trump did not do anything of the stuff that he during his campaign were made, at least to be prominent in his pronounced foreign policy toward the Palestinians. He said he's going to restore aid to UNRWA. He did, but we saw at the end of his presidency that aiding UNRWA has become outlawed by the U.S. Congress and so on. If that tells us anything, it tells us that the administration went along with that thing. So the one element that where he succeeded, basically, he took it back. In terms of, he promised to reopen the U.S. consulate, and I was told day after day in the State Department, yes, we are committed to this. We are going to do it. The U.S. consulate that was opened in Jerusalem back in 1832, a long time ago. It's been there for a very long time. So he did not do that. He said he's going to reopen the office of the PLO in Washington. He did not do that. There's so many things that he did that he said that they just did not do. So. To pay lip service to an issue and to implement it are two separate things. Now, what we have seen Biden do is basically destroy the last vestiges of the two-state solution, or the possible two-state solution, by giving Israel not only a green light, but an open highway to go on and basically make the two-state solution something that is completely eviscerated and will not happen. Not only that, I mean, the Palestinians really face a future where I mean, non-existence is basically a real thing. What we see them do, what we see Israel doing, is basically destroying the existence of the Palestinians. That's what you see in Gaza. And just I want to remind you all, I'm sure you're aware, the Lancet report said not only 45,000 people that were killed, but maybe 180,000, and that is probably the most likely figure. There's the whole population of Gaza was moved around. The administration has lied through its teeth. It's used negotiation basically to perpetuate war as a tool of war. They were never sincere about the negotiations, because if the United States of America wanted to impose a ceasefire or wanted to call for a ceasefire, it could have done it with a phone call. And we have seen that not only with Reagan, not only with other presidents, but even with Biden himself. Back in May in 2021, Biden picked up the phone and he told Netanyahu, listen, fella, you ran out of runway, so stop this war. And they did, because Israel is a client state. Israel is a client state that depends totally on the United States of America. It could probably survive for 3 or 4 days. That's what they said in Congress in terms of ammunition. I mean, we have to keep sending them ammunition. We send them billions and billions of dollars to do that. So on the Middle East, Biden is not only insincere, but he really is complicit. He is in cahoots with the Israelis, with the genocide that is ongoing. So that's where we are now, and in every other way. I mean, let's remember, Biden is old establishment imperialist and the neocons. He served the military-industrial complex. I hate to be throwing these slogans around and so on, and And by the way, Trump is the same way. I mean, Trump is going to push forward the sort of the American imperial agenda. Remember, in Afghanistan, I'm sorry for taking so long, but in Afghanistan, Trump has signed on to withdraw all U.S. forces. He didn't. Why he didn't? Because the huge amount of money that was being made in Afghanistan, all these contractors that they said, hey, wait, we can't pull out because we're making all this money. And basically he waited and threw this in Biden's lab, and then we had this chaotic withdrawal, embarrassing withdrawal, and so on. So very quick points. I mean, definitely Biden would like to sort of push Trump into this quagmire of wars and so on, bog him down in these wars and all this. And we see this happening in Syria. We saw it happening in Ukraine. He's accelerating the aid to Ukraine. If he can find a way to continue that war for another 10 years, he will do it. But as far as doing something on the promises of a two-state solution and resolving the Palestinian issue, remember, the last act of on aid, for instance, we on the 12th of October, or 13th of October, the Secretary of State of the United States of America, Anthony Blinken, and the Secretary of Defense of the United States of America, Lloyd Austin, issued a letter telling the Israelis, you have 30 days to allow aid in. And on the 12th of November, they said, well, Israel did not allow the aid in, but we were kidding. We're not going to withhold any arms. So this administration is complicit in the Palestinian genocide.
We're going to take a short break. When we come back, I have a question for all three distinguished guests, and that is, we'll ask them how to explain the timing of the events in Syria. The HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, is taking over Aleppo and Hama.
Yeah.
When we come back after the break.
With more than 30,000 successful in vitro fertilizations, IVF Michigan is now ranked as one of America's best fertility clinics, according to Newsweek magazine. IVF Michigan fertility centers are the recognized leaders in high-quality fertility care. With locations in Bloomfield Hills and 9 other cities in Michigan and Ohio, IVF has experts in all aspects of the field. A founding member, American board-certified Dr. Nicholas Shama, is one of the leading reproductive endocrinologists in Michigan and Ohio. He has performed over 20,000 successful IVF cases, and it's helped thousands of couples fulfill their dreams of parenthood. When it's time to get personalized care from Dr. Nicholas Shama at one of America's best fertility clinics, call IVF Michigan Fertility Centers in Michigan and Ohio toll-free at 855-952-9600. 855-952-9600.
Behind the scenes, Michigan's public health team is working to make Michiganders across the state healthier, bringing healthcare closer to home with mobile clinics, increasing access to healthy food through farmers markets and WIC, doing hearing and vision screenings in schools, helping families navigate healthcare challenges. Learn more about how public health workers protect us all at michigan.gov/public health. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Were you recently at the emergency room, urgent care, or at your doctor's office being told you need a hand, wrist, or elbow specialist? At the Katranji Hand Center, we offer the latest techniques in hand, wrist, and elbow care. From sports injuries to work injuries to everyday hand, wrist, and elbow problems, the specialists at Katranji Hand Center are here to get you back on track. Call us in East Lansing today at 517-332-4263 or visit us at KatranjiHandCenter.com to schedule your appointment today.
ArabNews.com, bringing you breaking news from across the Middle East and the latest on Arabs in America. Get inside the latest headlines with expert analysis and insights at ArabNews.com. Join over 5 million Facebook fans and over 10 million monthly readers. ArabNews.com, news that matters to you.
Are you going to start a restaurant or a grocery store soon? Do you need floor plans and designs? Call Naji Abood at 734-744-9796. Do you want to buy kitchen and restaurant equipment at discount prices? Call Naji Abood now, 734-744-9796. New Concept Products and Design, the trademark of kitchen equipment. 5% discount on all purchases of $75,000 or more. New Concept Products and Design, new location, 31185 Schoolcraft in Livonia. Learn more at www.newconceptproducts.com. Call Naji Abood, 734-744-9796.
At Top Rehab Physical Therapy Clinic in Dearborn, we provide effective physical therapy sessions in order to limit pain and discomfort. Top Rehab provides physical therapy care for any diagnosis prescribed by a physician, and we regularly see and treat conditions such as stroke, TMJ, fibromyalgia, sciatica, joint pain, and more. We use a variety of pain management methods, including modalities, soft tissue mobilization, and therapeutic exercise. If you're in need of physical rehabilitation or physical therapy, get the highest quality health care at Top Rehab. Most insurance is accepted, and we're open Monday, Wednesday, and Friday 8 to 6, Tuesday and Thursday 8 to 5, and Saturday 10 till 2. Call for an appointment today at 313-846-0555. That's 313-846-0555. Choose Top Rehab Physical Therapy Clinic on Michigan Avenue in Dearborn. Life's too short to be in pain.
I am Atif Abdalmajid. Join me the first Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. I will be discussing some of the most important issues and events in the Middle East live on America's Voice of the Arabs. WNZK 690 AM and WDMV 700 AM.
Welcome back to Radio Baladi. We are discussing 2024 and the events that are shaping the Middle East and the world. My question now goes to all three distinguished guests, and let me start with Dr. Katranji. And the question is, how do you explain the timing of events taking place in Syria, the storming of Aleppo, and Hama by the HTS Hayat Tahrir al-Sham?
Well, I disagree with my colleagues. In the sense that if everything can be pointed as a conspiracy or some kind of chess piece that America for somehow is immediately involved, it's an oversimplified view of the Middle East and global politics. There are numerous forces on the ground that occur, and I think it's really important for for us to kind of look at the reality on the ground in Syria. This didn't happen in a vacuum, and every analyst will tell you what we're seeing now in Syria was going to happen. I think just enough opportunities have now occurred on the ground that facilitated the rapid expansion that we're seeing. This civil war had never stopped. It went into a cold phase, as many civil wars do. And it's about realignment. And you've got two distinct situations that occurred in Syria specifically. One is the regionalization of Syria. Syria is essentially 5 states. You have the Northwest, where it's the Idlib province ruled by HTS or a various coalition of the historical Assad opposition forces. You have a coalition, and this is where America's at play, is actually in the Northeast, where it's, and by the way, Turkey is in the Northwest. So just to be clear, you have the Northeast, in which you have the Kurdish coalition. There are Arabs in that coalition. There's also the United States involved. This is the Hasaka, Raqqa area, Hasaka, Deir ez-Zor, Raqqa area. Then you also have Al-Huran or Dar'a, which is in the south to the southeast, in which this has got a historical alignment, traditional relationships with Jordan because of the Hurani Arab tribes. You also have Sweda, which is historically Druze. This is a Druze community and a very proud community that have their traditions, etc. And they've run semi-autonomously for a period of time. And what was kind of not seen but has been going on for over a year and a half is actually the opposition of the Druze to the Assad ruling family, as Assad traditionally liked to celebrate that it is the minority representative in Syria for all the minorities in Syria. It turns out that not every minority feels the same way when it comes to the Assad regime. And intriguingly, even there are Alawite components, even from the own sector. Again, nobody's monolith. There's no monoliths anywhere in the world, and certainly not in the Middle East. And then you obviously have Damascus as it's ruled by Hafez al-Assad. He's had about, since 2016, relatively 8 years of peace or quiet to build institutions and infrastructures to be able to improve the bulwark, improve the economy. We've watched the Syrian lira steadily plummet. We've watched infrastructure control and infrastructure projects mired in corruption and delay. Very often areas, the average electricity time for many of these cities is about 2 hours a day. Very hard to function, very hard to preserve food, very hard to address your needs from season to season. And also you've had the issue of Captagon and the distribution and almost a narco state network that is developed within the Damascus area and other parts that has really become a significant security threat to Gulf countries, for instance, such as Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, and in which a lot of times that Captagon ends up on their streets. Even Jordan had conflicts there. In Idlib, which faces similar type of restrictions because HTS is considered a terrorist organization, the European Union, the United States. However, in Idlib and in their interactions, there's been a lot of infrastructure building. So you have electricity almost 24/7. You have no cutoff in fuel supplies. The currency traded in that area typically is Turkish currency, and so there's a stabilizing force. And the earthquake that occurred in May of 2023, you had a very destabilizing event in which the Syrian government was unable to provide recovery despite billions in aid coming to the area as effectively to the earthquake victims as, for instance, the earthquake that struck the Idlib in the north, which is the Kurdish areas as well, severely, and they were able to rebuild and recover far more quickly. So there was basically a type of embers and flames kind of buried under a fire that could suddenly erupt. The sudden withdrawal, Assad has never relied on his army to protect him. He's relied on foreign actors, whether it's Russia. Russian forces have largely withdrawn from Syria as the war on the Ukraine has persisted. Iran itself has largely withdrawn many of its critical command and control, obviously from strikes, whether from Israel or from other conflicts, including conflicts within Iran itself that they had to address. And obviously, with Hezbollah becoming involved in the Gaza war toward the south, that left them vulnerable, and they were struck then by Israel significantly, deteriorating a lot of their position, which was then resulted in the withdrawal of several forces of Hezbollah toward that area, which then created a vacuum in which nature hates a vacuum. HTS began to rapidly expand. Now, who gave the green light, that's going to be something that many people are going to make a lot of money writing books about in the future, but that's kind of the reality on the ground as it expanded. And because of the because of this situation, military forces who haven't been paid for several weeks, several months, who haven't had electricity with consistency, once they saw that there was really no institutional support, Assad happened to be out of the country at the time, there was no command and control, largely then began to withdraw. And so you saw this rapid expansion fairly overnight into Halab and relatively quickly into Hama, despite, let's say, more intense fighting. But this was a much more coordinated effort. So I do agree there had to be some external forces that were also providing logistical support for this opposition movement to be able to allow for the coordination that was seen as it expanded. So this is the reality. It's not a why did it happen now? I think because there was enough of a vacuum on the ground. There was enough deterioration in infrastructure in the Assad-controlled regime and in those Assad areas that really allowed for an opportunity for then going in that direction. And again, you saw Sueda and Horan basically largely aligned with it, but not doing anything. They're running autonomously. And so that further weakens, there's no resource. And again, the militias that the Assad regime has largely relied upon to enforce its political will in these areas have largely been decimated and or have become absent or have withdrawn or returned back to their countries. So left a personnel vacuum for the Assad regime for this expansion to occur. The outcome.
Right. I mean, I think Dr. Katranji has gone on for a very long time. We're coming to the end of this program, and I think that, because he's throwing a lot of things together.
Well, I'm not throwing a lot of things.
Hold on one second. So basically, conveniently molding, what is going on into his own, obviously his own thinking and so on. I'm just. He's very convenient. Listen to that.
Debate, and I understand that's
okay, but we're
respectful about my perspective.
No. I respect your perspective. That's your perspective, and that's exactly what it is. I'm saying that you so conveniently say, look, this happened exactly after the ceasefire in Lebanon. So there is a connection there. That's one. I'm not saying conspiracy and so on. You conveniently forget that.
I didn't.
Please allow me to say. Okay. All right.
Okay,
so you're talking about. Yeah. Allow me just to say a couple of things. I know I have like a minute or two. But, let's not forget that Turkey was in control of Idlib. It is supplying it with electricity. It was immune and so on. He conveniently forgets the Kaiser law that really basically choked Syria all throughout these years, and he's basically forgot that the interference of the United States of America and the stealing of oil and all this things. He basically forgets that Turkey has occupied 11% of Syria and controls probably 30% of Syria and so on. He conveniently forgets that
Turkey stated every single one of those things that you pointed out.
That aspires. Please allow me. That aspires to basically annex Aleppo and Idlib and all these things. Yes, I agree with you. Syria is we have almost a deja vu, a remake of Sykes-Picot, in Syria, and it's being divided and so on. And it is divided for a very simple reason. I mean, you can say whatever you want, but in fact, that Syria is the last place to say, I'm not going to normalize with Israel. I'm not going to do this. They offered it all kinds of things. We give you this and so on. And if you go back, Dr. Katranji, I mean, this whole thing began, it's all about money. It's all about money. It goes back to the proposed pipeline. There were two proposals back, back way then, for a pipeline to come from Iran, through Iraq and so on, through Syria and onto the Mediterranean, and the beneficiary would have been Syria. And now we have the Qatari thing, this coalition, Qatar, America, and all Turkey, and all these things to bring in the oil from Qatar, go through Saudi Arabia, go through Jordan, and then go on to Turkey, and the beneficiary would be Turkey. So this is, but then I mean, we'll have another hour to talk about this if we can, So I'm saying that yes, the regime has been there. The regime is dictatorial. We're not there because it's dictatorial. This interference is not there because so on. And in the end, HTS is a terrorist organization designated by the United States of America. Do you want them? Do you want to see them ruling Syria?
I don't think Assad has successfully ruled Syria, and I think the level of atrocity.
You want to see Libya? You want to see Syria exactly like Libya? Because that's what you want to have.
Okay, guys. I have so many questions, but I'm running out of time. That's an interesting interaction, but I am running out of time. So thank you very much, Dr. Katranji. Thank you very much, Professor Roth, and thank you very much, Mr. Arakat. And ladies and gentlemen, I will see you again the first Friday next month. Have a good weekend.